Welcome back, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. US President Donald Trump says that Ukraine should make a deal to end the war with Russia because Russia is a very big power. This after meeting Vladimir Putin in Alaska. Trump told Volodymyr Zelensky that Putin has offered to freeze the front lines if Kyiv ceded all of Donetsk. This is a key Russian target. Meanwhile, France, Germany and the UK will host a call today with allies on the ongoing peace efforts in the Ukraine war. This comes as Germany says the US is ready to join security guarantees. Canada, Turkey, India and South Korea all respond positively to the talks, highlighting this moment as one of momentum. Protests are taking place across Israel with calls for a hostage deal and an end to the war in Gaza. It comes as Israel says Gaza residents will be provided shelter equipment as the IDF prepares to relocate them from combat zones. Meanwhile, 39 Palestinians at least have been reportedly killed in the enclave, according to local officials. A planned visit by US trade negotiators to New Delhi later this month has been called off. The delayed talks on a proposed trade agreement dash hopes of relief from additional US tariffs on Indian goods from August the 27th. At least 8 people have died and 4 remain missing after flash floods in northern China, according to state media. The country has faced weeks of extreme monsoon rains with heavier than usual downpours battering its north and south. This comes as at least 344 people are dead in northwestern Pakistan after 2 days of heavy rains and flash flooding. The deluge struck with lightning, landslides and cloudbursts in the deadliest downpour of this monsoon season. Bodies remain missing and search and rescue operations are still underway. The Republican governor of 3 states is sending hundreds of National Guard troops to Washington at President Donald Trump's request. The deployment came after DC officials and the administration agreed to keep Mayor Muriel Bowser's police chief in charge amid legal challenges. And it comes as pro-democracy activists and Labour groups hold hundreds of rallies nationwide to oppose the Trump administration's push for Texas to redraw its congressional map. Beto O'Rourke spoke in Texas, where Democratic lawmakers have fled to block a Republican-backed redistricting plan. But we start in the Middle East this hour as families of Israeli hostages have held a news conference in Tel Aviv to call on all of Israel to join a national general strike to end the war on Gaza. According to reports, family members urge citizens to put pressure on the Israeli government to secure a deal to bring back their loved ones who have been held by Hamas in Gaza since October the 7th, 2023. Thousands of businesses and individuals across the countries have joined the strike, which includes protests and acts of disruption across Israel. This action comes more than a week after Israel's Security Cabinet approved plans to capture Gaza City following 22 months of war that have reportedly created dire humanitarian conditions in the Palestinian territory. Let's now take a listen to what the hostage family members have had to say.
ראשי המשק ולאזרחי ישראל לעצור הכל למען החזרת 50 החטופים ולמען הצלת החיילים מהסתבכות נוספת של המלחמה הארוכה בתולדות ישראל. ההתגייסות מלמטה למעלה מדהימה. אלפי חברות פרטיות לצד ההסתדרות יאפשרו לעובדיהם לעצור הכל ולהקדיש את כל היום למען היקרים שלנו. התמיכה העצומה מרגשת עד דמעות. אנחנו מרגישות שכולם מבינים שהמאבק הוא לא פרטי של המשפחות, אלא של כל עם ישראל.
Well, this comes as several thousand protesters also rallied in New York City to protest starvation in Gaza. According to reports, this was the largest pro-Palestinian protest held in the city in recent months. The demonstration took place in front of the New York Public Library in Manhattan, next to Bryant Park. Well, joining us to discuss these developments with protests, not just in Israel, but as we've reported, across continents. Yossi Kapawasa, an Israeli intelligence and security expert who joins us live from Tel Aviv. As always, Yossi, it is a privilege to have you on the programme. Unrest in Israel, questions about further expansions in Gaza, of course, coming after news from Israel saying that Palestinians would be sent south as this operation in Gaza City gets underway. Has Benjamin Netanyahu got the support of the Israeli people? Yossi, just checking you can hear me. Well, while we wait for Yossi to reconnect.
I hear you.
Yes,
well.
you can. Fantastic.
Yes, first of all, good morning and thanks for being with you again. Regarding the question, well, the people of Israel are divided on supporting the government for a long time. This is a disputed issue all along the last more than 20 years now. And, it's not going to change, and this is more or less the map of the support and the response to the call of the families of the hostages to disrupt life in Israel today. It's many of the supporters of this idea are on the streets, and they are not only supporting the families, but they are also protesting against the government. It's the same thing, and they take harsh measures in order to make everybody realize how upset they are. Now, to the point itself about the hostages, of course, this is high time that the hostages would be released. But Hamas, not the government, is not willing to release them. It's Hamas. And the only way Hamas is ready to release them is if the Israel succumbs and surrenders to all its demands. This is unacceptable for the government, and I think also for the most people in Israel that do not want to allow Hamas to be able to say that 7th of October was a good idea, and it promoted the Palestinian interests and enabled them to reach all kinds of things that were not able to be reached beforehand.
Yes, absolutely, Yossi. And of course, we can't forget in these moments the horrific attacks of October the 7th, 2023, which did spark this war. Of course, questions since about how Israel has conducted themselves within Gaza is a discussion that will continue to take place. But I do want to focus on the hostages. Of course, families of hostages, around 50 still being held, both dead and alive, within the Gaza Strip. Is this move from Benjamin Netanyahu expanding the offensive to cross into Gaza City? Is this an acknowledgement that the lives of the hostages that are still living, of course, could be put at risk? And do you think this is why we're seeing so much action from certain Israelis over the war, calling for an end to the conflict and a hostage deal?
Well, there's no doubt that the decision to take over Gaza Strip, the entire Gaza Strip, including Gaza City, is putting the hostages in greater danger. But they were all the time under a lot of danger, and we saw the video clips of the remaining hostages, the living hostages, that were so horrendous that you know that they are in danger with or without this decision. And the point in the government's decision is that it seems that only if you are ready to take over the Gaza Strip, you can put enough pressure on Hamas to show some flexibility and to be ready to make some concessions. Because otherwise, they believe that Israel is never going to take over the Gaza Strip. They are all going to stay in power anyhow. And they will be able to say that the 7th of October was a good idea and try to prepare themselves to carry out another 7th of October. So it's the logic of the government is that you have to make Hamas realize that this assumption is wrong if you want to make them ready to accept a deal. And the fact of the matter is that this logic of the government does prove a little bit true, because right after the decision to take over Gaza, Hamas has changed its policies and now is sending delegations to Egypt with a more flexible position, and there is an assessment of the people who are in charge of in Israel, who are in charge of assessing Hamas position, that they are now more ready to make compromises. So it seems that this way of action is bearing fruit.
Yes, and Yossi, we only have around a minute or so left, but of course protests also in the US. We have seen action within the US, of course a staunch ally of Benjamin Netanyahu's government and his action. We've seen military support from the US in Iran as well. How important is that US support for Israel at a time where there is a lot more international condemnation of the situation in the Gaza Strip?
Well, of course, the American support is critical, and those demonstrations in the United States, of course, do not represent the position of the United States administration. On the contrary. And I think the administration understands the importance of putting more pressure on Hamas. They realize that the fact that there was no hostage deal until now is because of Hamas positions, not because of Israel. Israel was ready to go for a deal. And they support Israel in its policy right now, and that's very important, especially as we see what's happening in Europe and elsewhere, where we see support of Hamas. It's unbelievable, but the Europeans are supporting Hamas at this point.
Yes, absolutely. Yossi Kapawasa, as always, a pleasure to have you on the programme. These protests in Israel are continuing throughout the day, and we will continue to bring all of those further updates to you here on NewsX World as we get them. Let's move on now, though, and a planned round of US-India trade talks has been called off. Negotiators were due in New Delhi from August the 25th to August the 29th. The move delays a proposed bilateral trade agreement. It also dashes India's hopes of relief from new US tariffs starting on August the 27th. President Donald Trump imposed an extra 25% duty on Indian goods over New Delhi's continued imports of Russian oil. The new tax will raise duties on some exports to as high as 50%. Talks have stalled after 5 rounds. Disputes remain over India's farm and dairy markets and its refusal to halt Russian oil purchases. Well, with us to discuss the announcement that we have had of these talks being postponed and called off for later this month, Dr. Ajay Dua, a former Secretary of Commerce and senior economist who joins us live from New Delhi. Dr. Dua, thank you for your time. How significant is this for India that these talks will not now take place ahead of that August 27th date in which tariffs are set to jump?
Thank you very much, Mr. Joshua, for having me. I think India would have liked to see the 6th round of negotiations take place on the 25th of August, as had been scheduled some time ago. So to that extent, there would be a degree of disappointment with this announcement of yesterday. But at the same time, I do sincerely hope that President Trump's statement yesterday after meeting President Putin, that the 50% levied by him for countries which are importing oil from the US is going to be highly consequential in the sense that it's a weighty tariff and that he might revisit it shortly. So these comments give India some hope that the additional 25% levied on 25%, I think we'll have to live with the basic 25% till such time as the bilateral trade agreement takes place. But the additional 25%, which is, call it retaliatory tariff or secondary tariff, though that it seems the president is willing to have a relook at. If that happens, I would say yesterday's summit meeting between the two presidents would be beneficial to India, and by the very fact that it had been postponed to the 27th earlier, that means after the 6th round of negotiations on 25th was supposed to begin in India. I think an announcement to that effect of postponing the levy of the additional secondary tariff from 25% to 50% could take place.
Yes.
That's the kind of an indication which comes out clearly if from President Trump's own enunciation.
Yes. Dr. Dua, let's build on that, because of course these secondary tariffs that have been placed on India for purchasing of Russian oil is an outlier. India is the only country that has been hit with this extra tariff rate. And of course, you allude to those vital conversations that took place in Alaska just in recent days. And of course, that situation itself is not fixed. There is instability. No deal has been agreed. We know Trump's rhetoric can sometimes change depending on whether progress is being made or not. Do you think India is being made a scapegoat in this situation? And do you think that Donald Trump himself his opinion and his decisions on the Russia-Ukraine conflict could be devastating to the Indian economy?
Not quite. I think devastating would be a very strong word, but it would certainly impose a burden because our tariff would be on about 55% of our exports to the US out of $90 billion. And to that extent, an additional 25, the secondary tariff, would impact India's trade. It will but it could compel India to look for markets elsewhere, and also it would probably hit the countries, the so-called Make in India program, which we are pursuing in India, that could get hit with this additional, the US market not being available, because Indian goods under the Make in India program are based on certain degree of protectionism, and they are as such not too competitive. The additional 25% would have made the situation worse. But the relief is President Trump postponing the secondary tariff of 25% to a date linked with the progress of the Ukraine, the discussions on Ukraine between the two presidents, and maybe the third one, President Zelensky, also might.
Dr. Dua, we are unfortunately out of time, but thank you ever so much for such great insight on this topic, which has so many permutations, which aren't just linked to India-US trade relations. There is so much to continue monitoring, and we will do so here on NewsX World. Let's switch continents now, as Bolivia is voting in a general election that could end the long dominance of the left-wing MAS party. Ballot stations opened at 8 a.m. local time and will close at 4 p.m, with initial results expected later tonight. Opinion polls show Conservative candidate Samuel Doria Medina and former President Jorge Tuto Carrigo leading, but neither with enough support to avoid a runoff. Around 30% of voters remain undecided, according to polls, making their choice crucial in what is seen as the most unpredictable race in the country in decades. The election comes amid the country's worst economic crisis in 40 years. Inflation has doubled to 23%, and Bolivians face long lines for fuel, shortages of subsidized bread, and a lack of US dollars that has pushed some to turn to cryptocurrencies. The MAS party is splintered, with its candidate Eduardo del Castillo trailing badly and Senate President Andronico Rodriguez running independently. Former leader Evo Morales is barred from the race and has called for a boycott, but his influence is waning. We'll now listen to what this Bolivian voter has had to say.
El tema del voto nulo es algo que en ninguna parte del mundo se ha visto, ¿no? Pero según se va a presentar mañana, y veo que bastante gente va a apoyar lo que es al voto nulo, porque no están conformes, ¿no?, con los candidatos, más que todo de la derecha, que ya han entrado esos presidentes, ¿no? Ya han entrado esos, por ejemplo, Tuto ya ha estado, Samuel Doria Medina quiere entrar, pero ellos vean sus intereses propios, ¿no? Entonces...
Well, some experts are saying that today's vote is seen as a crossroads for Bolivia, with the possibility of a right-wing government for the first time in over 2 decades. But of course, the result is in the balance. Joining us to discuss this crossroads is Dr. Satoru Nagao, a fellow at the Hudson Institute, joining us live from Tokyo, Japan. Dr. Nagao, thank you for once again joining us today on the programme and here on NewsX World. The situation in Bolivia, of course, is difficult. We detailed some of the challenges facing the country. How could this election influence which direction the nation goes in?
for a long time, the Bolivia's government was led by the left-wing parties, and under the left-wing party, especially the President Morales, the relation with the United States was deteriorated very much. So that's why current Bolivia's economy rely on exporting the natural gas or other minerals only. So in this case, the price of these minerals or the natural gas affected Bolivia's economy directly. So that's why the price is moving and the situation is moving too. But this election, this left-wing party is divided and many candidates. So that's why the leadership itself is very uncertain in Bolivia. That's why any candidate can win this presidential election. So under such kind of situation, anyone must reform their economy after they win the election. So who can show the strong leadership is very important. But view from the current situation, anyone cannot get the majority of the supporters. One of the key is the support of the former President Morales, because under the rules, he cannot be the candidate of the presidential election this time. But the supporter is there, and for a long time he showed influence in the Bolivia's politics. So that's why which group supports which part of the current ruling party or the opposition party, that will be the decisive factor, I think. And at the same time, I repeatedly say, even if it is not easy to expect who will win the election, anyway, the next president must reform the economy drastically.
Yes, and Dr. Nagao, we don't have too much longer left, but I want to look outside of Bolivia in terms of those geopolitical relations, strengthened ties with Russia, closer ties with Brazil, Cuba and Venezuela are also key allies. How pivotal is Bolivia's strength for these nations amid a growing rift between BRICS countries, developing nations, and of course Western allies?
The economy is deteriorated. This means that the relation with the strong economy, which is the United States or other Western country, will be key. But if the left-wing candidate continue, there is a possibility that they will not restore the relation with the United States or other Western countries. This means that Bolivia's economy is still facing the very serious situation, I think.
Dr. Nagao, as always, excellent insights on a complex topic, but one that we will continue to monitor. With polls closing at 4 p.m. local time, we'll be here to bring you any updates from that Bolivian election. Let's now move to Africa, as Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces have shelled El Fasher, the besieged capital of North Darfur. At least 17 civilians have reportedly been killed, with 25 wounded, according to local medical sources. Local committees say heavy artillery hit residential areas, destroying homes and infrastructure. The attack is described as one of the deadliest in recent months. To the north, RSF shells struck the Abu Shouk displacement camp, reportedly killing several civilians, including a community leader. Witnesses report many more dead, buried without reaching hospitals. Al Fasher has been under RSF siege since May last year, as the group continues its war with Sudan's army. Well, joining me to discuss this, my colleague Asuma Kotoka, anchor and correspondent with NewsX World, joining us live from the newsroom. Asuma, what more do you have for us?
Yes, from what we know that in Al Fasher there was paramilitary forces known as RSF. They attacked the civilians and infrastructure damage is reported, and so far from the reports we know that 17 civilians are killed and 25 injured. However, reports say that these numbers are only the people who were able to reach medical facilities, suggesting that there were more people who did not or who were not able to reach or the medical care or hospital or get access to these. So there are several others. We don't know how many, but we know that there were more people who have been killed in this shelling. It lasted on Saturday, and it started early morning on Saturday and continued till mid-day, according to reports. And this is all happening while Sudan suffers with cholera outbreak, one of the deadliest so far, and also it's suffering with hunger, and also reportedly al-Fashir, because of lack of food and lack of access. The food there has now risen, the prices up to 4.6%. People there are not able to afford food as well. So this situation in Sudan is dire, as they are also facing this malnutrition crisis with paramilitary forces attacking civilians, also the division in the government, which is now Sudan suffers with parallel government. So all of this is happening right now.
Absolutely, Asuma. Thank you ever so much for that context. The dire situation across the country, something we will continue to monitor. We move to Asia, and at least 8 people have been killed in flash floods in northern China on Sunday, with 4 others still missing as the East Asian monsoon continues to batter the world's second largest economy. According to reports, the banks of a river flowing through Inner Mongolia's grasslands burst at around 10 p.m. on Saturday, sweeping away 13 campers near Bayonne city, a key agricultural hub. 1 person has been rescued. Since July, China has endured weeks of extreme weather, pounded by heavier than usual downpours as the monsoon stalled over the country's north and south. Since July, China has endured weeks of extreme weather, pounded by these rains. Of course, the reports are stating that weather experts attribute the shifting pattern to climate change, as flash floods displace thousands and threatens billions of dollars in economic losses. Heavy rains in Beijing last month left 44 people dead, with the capital's rural suburbs hardest hit, while a landslide in neighbouring Hebei province killed another 8 people, according to local officials. While joining us to discuss the latest deadly flash flood incident that we are seeing across the world, Desmond Majekadunmi, who is an environmentalist, joining us live from London. Desmond, as always, a pleasure to have you on the programme. Unfortunately, again, we're talking about death and destruction caused by a natural disaster. The simultaneous incident in China is happening with, of course, flash flooding in Pakistan as well. Why are rains so much heavier this year, and why are they leading to deadly flash floods?
Indeed, they are so much heavier. In fact, in some areas, they are 30%, 25%. Generally, they're just heavier all over the world. Rains in one corner, heat-driven fires in the other corner. The one that started on the 4th of July, American Independence Day, in the desert there, is still burning today. 40% is still on fire. This is classic climate change, or it can be very clearly classified as karma. Karma is consequences for your actions. And I do believe that the world generally can learn a lot from India's philosophy. Because from my limited knowledge, I do know that the Indian population take these rules and regulations of action begetting reaction very seriously. Having said that, unfortunately, India herself, Pakistan, has not been left out of this whole flooding. The big sign, though, is that let's take this as a warning, because what we are doing against nature that she has to react to is not improving very much. So let's start caring for nature. Let's start being far more loving.
Yes, Desmond, what is the financial impact that governments will be facing off the back of this flash flooding? Of course, not just civilian loss, but also infrastructure. How hard is that for governments and local authorities to deal with?
Excellent question, because the financial impacts of these various financial environmental disasters, especially like the flooding or even the fires, they far exceed the cost of mitigating it. And this is the wake-up call. It's going to cost you far more in terms of your financial losses if you allow this to continue and to become more exacerbated, to become worse. So it is better to deploy the funds available now, obviously, to curtail this. And this means, cut back on the pollution. Hundreds of millions of tons of greenhouse gases, you must cut back on it, or you're going to lose far more than you gain. Not to mention massive, massive amounts of tree planting. Billions of trees need to be planted, and the ones that are there must be protected. So the financial losses will far, far be outweigh the gains from preventing it from happening. After all, prevention is better than cure.
Yes, absolutely, Desmond. I wish we had longer to discuss this topic. Of course, you alluded to the wildfires that are burning across the world as well, a serious point of concern for so many, the environment and the impacts that it is having on civilians across the world. Thank you ever so much for your insight. It's a topic we will, of course, continue to discuss. But for now, that is all we have time for. Make sure to stay tuned here on NewsX World for all of the latest updates and discussions on the breaking topics from across the world.